Well, once again, we're continuing our discussion on how do we go about the process of research as research experts. In many ways, that's what you become. You become a researcher by the very steps that you follow. And so what we want to do here is we want to look at the foundation of social science. That's really the heart of what you're accomplishing as a researcher. We're looking at the fields of organization. We're also looking at the field of leadership. Now, the great thing about studying at CIU is that you get the opportunity to look at things from a biblical perspective. And that's what we would like for you to consider as you're working through your research. What does the Bible have to say about your subject area? And when you get down to the detail level of the scriptures, you find that, wow, the Bible does inform many of the aspects of social science. And so when we think about the foundation of social science as it looks at or considers theory, we're looking at the logical explanation of the details concerning your subject. What is the theoretical foundation from where you are moving your topic from? So if you're looking at leadership, you could be studying servant leadership, you could be studying transformational leadership. From an organizational perspective, you could be looking at change management, how leaders move a organization through change, and so that's your theoretical foundation. Also, looking at the theoretical, we're looking at qualitative versus quantitative. That's the other side of the theory that you're looking at both leadership, now the worldview as what we've studied before. What's the worldview that is guiding your research methodology? And then in the middle there is the data collection. Ultimately, that's what you do as a researcher. You're collecting data as you see it, whether it's in a live lived experience, such as a qualitative design set where you go in and you do interviews with your population. And from there, you look at the interviews, you transcribe it, you work through each of the interview one by one, and you arrive at data. You have to then sort that data into meaningful themes. And we look at that from an observational aspect level. And then we move to the data analysis. What is the data saying about the subject that you studied? Are there patterns in the observation that you see? And then you arrive at some thematic or emergent themes that become the centerpiece for your research proposal or for your research dissertation. Now, when we look at patterns, we're looking at social irregularities. What are some of the themes that might pop up in a certain population aspect? So if we're looking at maybe poverty in a certain city area or a geographical location. If we're looking at an age bracket, age group, such as 18 to 25-year-olds, or looking at 30s and to 40s. And so we're looking at irregularities between the patterns within those social gaps. Aggregates, that means we're not looking at a particular individual, though we could do research particularly in the area of humanities. You might study a particular author and looking at the way they wrote certain books and literature pieces, but we're not doing that. We're looking at a population, and we want to know what that population believes, worldview, and how they communicate those beliefs within a test that we're going to employ. So again, the focus here is not on an individual, but rather the population that we have selected as part of our samples. And then lastly, we're looking at concepts and variables. We're looking at emergent themes, and then we're picking variables that match those concepts. And so again, a variable can go back to population zone. We're picking a segment of a society or a people group that we're looking at. Looking at variables and attributes here, this is important to human inquiry. So we're looking at the subject, and it can change at any moment. So for example, going back to age demographics or sex or gender, we're looking at occupation. And again, we're narrowing that focus. So if we're going to go and study an organization, they have, let's say in higher ed, they have a cabinet. And so we're only going to interview those in the higher cabinet, or we're going to look at executive directors that run particular ministries or organizations that have maybe a a board governance model. Again, we're specifying exactly our variables, and again, those can change between the subject that we're exploring, and hopefully your dissertation mentor will guide you through that process. Ethnicity is another consideration, social class that your population fits in. And then you might also consider a religious affinity. Are they a part of a denomination or a group or societal influence? And so that becomes an important part of the attributes and the variables that make up your research. Again, looking at variables and attributes, another quality in terms of the variable could be young, middle age, or elderly. Again, we're narrowing that focus of our population because we're going to delimit all these other gaps that might exist because we're only studying this particular narrow field. And again, you can look at the subcategories there from female versus male, and you may need to do that in your research. You may need to say, you know, I'm only going to study how males look at this particular subject, or females, and you'll have to delimit that in your chapter 3 accordingly. African American, Asian, or white, or Latino. Are you going to do a cross spectrum, or are you going to only focus on a particular ethnic group? And that will also matters of cross-contamination. You don't want to contaminate your research by studying everyone in the group, but maybe, again, the narrow focus will help you arrive at clean data or emergent patterns within that particular variable set. And again, you can see the denominational affiliation that you might need to study alone in its own unit, and then do potentially triangulation between 3 or 4 different groups as needed. In research, you have what we call is independent and dependent variables. See the definitions there. As you read your book, you'll arrive at, again, some more defining moments on how you arrive at independent and dependent variables. Let's just take it at face value here. A variable for independent has values that are not problematic in the analysis, but are taken simply as given. They're given statements. So an independent variable is presumed to cause or determine a dependent variable. Notice the key words there. An independent variable is presumed to cause or determine a dependent variable. So notice what dependent variable is defined at, okay? A variable assumed as dependent on or be caused by another. So it's influence, called the independent variable, and you will find that income is partly a function of the amount of formal education. So I'm trying to give you an example here of what a dependent variable may look like, and is treated as eventually as a dependent variable. So let me explain a little bit further as it relates to both the quantitative and qualitative process for doing this type of research. So the distinction there then is made between quantitative numbering system versus qualitative, as what we look at as essentially non-numerical data. Though we can use numbers in qualitative design sets, so it's not opposed to a number, but a number is simply a holding place for that idea or concept, as opposed to what quantitative data or quantitative research is moving after. So we're looking at numbers for quantitative reason. We're looking at numbers have meaning, and therefore it helps the researcher see trends and emergent patterns within a given population that they're studying. Again, both are useful research methodology that you can use, and depending on your population size, you may want to go more quantitative versus more qualitative, where the smaller the sample is okay for qualitative design methodology. So again, quantitative makes our observation of the data easier to aggregate and compare or summarize. Again, we're looking at the quantification of data, numbering. So a number 1, a number 2, so somebody of your population, there's 3 or 4 or 10 or 15 or 20 people say this about this particular topic. And the more you have, the more you have validity to establish the running theme. So in quantitative design methodology, you have to beef up your population size in order to get after validity and generalizability within that sample population. Now, qualitative design theory or design methodology is going to change. And the advantage versus quantitative or qualitative is in qualitative, you're looking at the words that people say, the phrases that they come back with as you're conducting your interviews. And so you as a researcher are not looking at surveys that you've sent out by email and wanting so many, I need to have so many respond to the survey by a set time. I'm going on the field, into the field, and I'm taking my population, I'm sitting down with them in a lived experience, and I'm saying, hey, here are my set of interview questions that I'm going to interview on. And there I have a recording device, and then I'm going to take that back and I'm going to transcribe the material. I'm also going to take field notes. I might even take those transcribed recordings and take it back to the people I interviewed on the field and say, hey, is this an accurate picture of our interview that we conducted, a few days ago or a few weeks ago? And that allows them to, what we talk about, member checking through that process. So I hope you see the difference between what you're after. So again, it depends on your population, the size of your population, what you're trying to drill down into in terms of the most important details of your research area. Now, there are ethics, and as we talk about ethics, right and wrong practices in regards to both qualitative and quantitative design methodology. Remember, when you're conducting social research, is that you are involved with an individual. And that could include an adult or a minor. A minor is someone who is not of age 18, and therefore you have to get a parental consent. And that also has to go through a lot of safeguard. And so more details are with the IRB as it relates to safeguarding minors that you're interviewing along the way. But as it relates to adults, we're looking for a voluntary participation. We're not forcing anyone to go down the road of this research. We're asking them to, would they be willing to participate? And know that even with a voluntary consent form, they could come back and say, you know what, I don't want to be in the research after all. It might negatively impact them as a leader, and so they bow out. And so you need to have a plan B in mind when you are going through this voluntary research with any topic that you're exploring. And then lastly, you don't want to harm the individual. This is why it's so important when you think about qualitative design set, when you are developing your own instrumentation, such as interview questions, you want to make sure that those interview questions are open-ended and do not cause any harm to the person that you're interviewing. And so again, your mentor will help you through that process, and also the IRB will ensure that there is no psychological or even spiritual harm that might take place as you conduct your research. And so we're wanting to protect from harm and provide a safe interview setting for the people that you've selected for your research. There are some traditional models of science as we think about the research or social inquiry that we're moving in. And so when you are conducting research, know that there is a scientific methodology that we have in mind. And so everyone has to develop that theoretical side. What's the theory that I'm trying to study? And that's why we're saying, here are your boundaries. You have leadership, and then you also have organization. So think about that as your PhD program, organizational leadership. So what do I want to study in terms of organizational life? What do I want to study in terms of the concept of a leader? And so I have people who are leading organizations, and that is really broad there. I mean, you can go as far as from individuals wanting to study pastors all the way to nonprofit organizations, executive vice presidents, and so on. A student could study the life of a professor at a local college. And again, whatever your design methodology is going to change. And so we're going to be looking at the size of your population. And if your size of your population is small, we're going to ask you to follow a certain design methodology, because that's only going to strengthen again, your validity and your generalizability as we work through the scientific method. So scientific method, you remember back in high school when you're working through your science course, we're looking at the theory, we're looking at testing a hypothesis, and it begins to define terms within your area or population, the instruments that you plan to use, the questions that you're seeking to answer from the body of literature. And then you're going to make those natural observations in order to confirm the hypothesis that you built around your theoretical perspective. So that's really the traditional model of social inquiry as we look at the field of research in this particular PhD program. And then lastly, as you think about fine-tuning your research problem and moving your research toward that written statement, you're going to review all of the literature as much as possible in the area that interests you. And so whether it's Christian education revolving around leadership, maybe you're working as a Christian principal at a local Christian high school, elementary school, and you want to explore different themes found within Christian education. Totally fine, because you're studying an organization and you're studying a particular leader within that corporate entity. And then you can drill down. We're looking at how the Bible informs your topic, how you're going to move from the theoretical down to the more practical application as you move toward chapter 5, your final chapter of your research dissertation. Of course, we want you to think about critical thinking skills, moving through discerning the problem statement, the multiple sides of that problem statement, and then moving toward your proposal. And this is what I often say to you as my colleagues as you're preparing to finish your PhD. In some ways, you've joined the ranks of others who have finished their PhD, who have arrived and they're done, they're finished, but you're moving through this skill of leadership. And so this is what I would encourage you. You should write your title in 4 different ways. Use the same qualitative design set, but the rest of your title should be restated in 4 different ways. And that just helps solidify your topic and where you're wanting to go. And one of those 4 will emerge as the leading contender for your topic. And then think about the tools and resources that you have available. How soon do you want to get this research done? Are you going to do a stratified research within your backyard? I mean, are you going to go broad where you're going to look at a national issue, or are you going to particularly look at your geographical location? And so that's what we call a stratified research population, that you're picking your research area and especially your population zone and how it best fits the timeline for your research. And again, I would use, if you're married, use your spouse, use people within your organization to fire back some comments. Hey, what do you think about this topic? What do you think about these questions as a possibility of arriving at, the emergent themes that you're after? And then as you work through your timeline, you're thinking about the written proposal, the time frame to which you're going to fulfill this dissertation research. And awfully, the last, as always, the last is rewrites. Know that you're going to have to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite your chapters and your sections. Your mentors and your editor will say the same thing. That's not clear. And if it's not clear to them, it's probably not clear. It might be clear to you, but it may not be clear to your reader. And you need to think like your reader. Your reader is new to the subject area, and you need to answer the question or in the field of research so that even a junior higher middle school student, if they were to pick up your research, would say, I get what you're writing about. And that helped me as I solidified my own topic that I was interested in studying and moved toward the dissertation finalization of that process in my own life and career. So I hope that helps you and encourages you in this part of the lecture of human inquiry as we think about the process of writing our dissertation. Look forward to interacting with you some more on some other videos.